just for those of you who are not aware, Berry Gardens is an industrial and friendly providence society formed just under 50 years ago. It started out with 6 growers that were located in Kent, and it gradually grew over the years to cover, as it does now, 46 growers across the country. And our further northest grower is in Aberdeenshire in Scotland, and is a specialist late cherry grower and blueberry grower in that area. So the cooperative specialises in berries and cherries, and although it started out supplying wholesale markets, now most of the fruit is sold through the major high street food retailers, from Aldi at one end to Waitrose at the other end. And from an initial £60,000 worth of sales in 1973, we're now selling over £320 million worth of fruit. 2/3 of that is grown by our members. And we're located in Kent, and we moved into these new premises in 2019. Currently within our grower community, we've got just under 300 hectares of orchards, many of them quite young, because there's been a resurgence in cherry growing with the introduction of dwarfing rootstocks, new cultivars, and particularly the use of polythene tunnels to cover off the weather risk. And these new technologies have enabled cherries to be grown well outside the traditional heartland in the North Kent region around Doddington, where it started out under Henry VIII's reign, I believe. And so some of these new areas are in the Upper West Midlands, and as I've already described, our furthest member in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. And currently this year we sold about 2,300 tonnes of cherries. And we expect that volume to grow quite exponentially as these new young orchards and plantings come into bearing. We hold at the moment within our grower community about 2/3 of the UK national supply. So I joined Kentish Garden, as it was then called, in 1995. I got appointed their technical executive in 1996, and through various different branding and name changes of the cooperative and its marketing company, I've ended up in the post of Director of Research since 2011. So the main pathogen I want to bring to your attention this morning is Pseudomonas syringae, bacterial canker of cherries. I'm sure most on the call, if not all, know a lot more about this pathogen than I do, but it's still a very serious problem in cherry production, as I will describe in a short case study shortly. The first time growers really know whether they've got a problem or not is when they see these sunken, gummy, necrotic lesions in the wood. And obviously, because it's a bacterial pathogen, it's quite hard to detect in the orchard until such time as you see these lesions appearing. And because it's a bacterial disease, obviously, one of the benefits of using polythene tunnels is that you can keep the growing environment much more managed compared to open field production. But anyway, I thought I'd bring to your attention the fairly serious economic consequences of an outbreak of Pseudomonas in a recently planted orchard in the West Midlands. So this was a 16-acre site planted in December 2016. The trees came from a reputable nursery in the European Union. As you're probably aware, we've become a country that likes to import things now rather than produce them here, manufacture them here. And most of the planting stock for soft fruit and tree fruit is now coming from overseas nurseries. This particular cultivar was a Canadian variety, and so the scion wood was imported from Canada. When the trees were planted, because the grower was making a big investment in this orchard, for the first 2 or 3 years of its life, the trees weren't covered. very disappointingly, in March 2017, we had this beast from the east phenomenon, which I think is behind the fairly widespread distribution of bacterial canker in this orchard. So later on in the spring, the blossoms on the 2-year-old wood, these were well-feathered knitboom trees, 2-year-old trees, died, but the trees grew. And the blossom death was attributed at the time to monolinia. We then had quite a wet summer in this particular region in 2017. And due to some slightly inappropriate advice, their autumn copper treatments were more appropriate for nectary control of apples rather than bacterial canker. And then in early February, due to some unusually warm weather, some of the blossoms start appearing. But then later on, the trees look like this. And it's quite a dramatic sight to see the level of death of buds and blossom on a 16-acre newly planted orchard. And what I think is interesting about this photograph is that you can see there's a sort of distinct line all the way down the tree stakes and the tops of the trees. And the upper portion of the tree is clearly where the beast from the east, cold temperatures, didn't quite reach, or rather the cold air was much more severe up until that point where you can start to see some green leaves. And then, of course, later on, the trees started exhibiting the typical necrotic symptoms and gummosis of bacterial canker. So here's another picture of the trees a little further on, where this is in 2019. And so this upper part of the tree that escaped the beast for the east has grown sort of reasonable lateral branches, but we've still got residual blossom death and bud death in the lower portions. And so the decision was taken to cut back the wood to what would look like clean wood to try and regrow the trees. And from there on, there's been a cycle of growth, blossom, lack of crop and death, and more pruning to try and escape the pathogen. So the consequences of this little investment, which wasn't so little in the end of the day, it cost about, well, best part of £250,000 to the grower concerned. He produced some budgets showing a steady rise of income in his business, all of which met with very unsympathetic ears to his bank manager. And the consequences is in this year, he had to sell off some land in order to reduce his borrowings. So if anybody has any doubt about the serious economic consequences of bacterial canker in UK cherry production, I hope this little case study brings it home quite sharply to you. So in the intervening time, we've supported research at NIA BMR into bacterial canker diversity. Most of our orchards up and down the country have been sampled to understand the nature of the pathogen in those locations. We badly need some plant protection products to help combat the disease. We don't have very much in our armory other than a copper-based product. And in the long term, we need to identify genetic resistance and breed new resistant cultivars. Berry Gardens supports the cherry breeding program at NIA BMR and pays for it wholly without any government assistance. And we desperately need to get some genetic resistance into the new cultivars coming from the program. And I'll leave it there. I hope that wasn't too long for you.